Hello everyone, my name is Jeff Hogan and welcome back to another Draft Today video as we open our first pack up here in our 665 draft. I actually have a lot of really interesting choices in this pack. We have this Tongue of the Black Crucible here, which is a 1/4 for 3 double blood threshold, life drain, and it says Diligence. This deals 2 damage to your opposing champion, so this deals it, so you'll gain the life. Or transform it into a Crucible Born, which when you have more life than your opponent, it's a 6/6 flyer. So, like, that's kind of an interesting bomb, but, like, the 1/4 is kind of hard to push through, and Blood doesn't have a ton of good Diligence enablers into it. The other thing about this card is that there's a Butcher in this pack, so if I take this, I'm passing this pack, sending the message that there's good Blood cards in this pack still. I think I actually want to take the Pyre Strike out of this pack because it takes a powerful Ruby card that's removal, and Feed the Flames is the only other good Ruby card in here, and it kind of sends the message that maybe you should not be in Ruby. There's an argument that Trueheart Skirmisher is an okay card, but I never feel compelled to like move into Ruby because of Trueheart Skirmisher. So I think taking this is a reasonable pick, and then hopefully that Feed the Flame wheels to us. So when we get our first pack back with only 9 cards, and if that Feed the Flames is there, we're going to move in heavy into the Ruby Shard for sure, because that means no one else is picking it up. This pack, someone took a comment out of this pack, and there's definitely a reason why. Like, none of these, Waltz of the Damned is really kind of too slow in this format. Ruby's Favor is like a mediocre combat trick, but I really don't have a high pick priority. Weeping Banshee is a powerful card, but it's like hard to get the payoff for. You need a very specific deck in order for it to work out for you, so I'm not a huge fan of picking up Weeping Banshee. Gralka is kind of slow. Spring Renewal is awkward as well. I think I'm going to pick the Cerulean Sage out of here. This is a really powerful 1-drop. And the Ruby Sapphire aggressive deck is pretty reasonable in this format. 0/3 for 1 that Diligences to gain +2 in flight. The Gralk usually isn't a reason for people to move into Sapphire, so this continues to kind of cut one of the best cards in a particular shard out of this pack. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I don't think Pyre Smoke Lurker is worthwhile. Outflank is a good diamond card, but I don't think it's worth moving into the shard for. And we're by no means committed to either of these thresholds right now, but we just kind of like picking up quality cards as we go and get a feel for what people are passing to us. Wow, this pack's pretty good, right? So there's a lot of cards in here that I'm interested in that are powerful. Salaga Mage is pretty reasonable in the Ruby Sapphire aggressive deck, but it's definitely not a card that we're third picking. I think our choice in this pack, there's 3 cards that jump out at me. Cloudbounder is a really powerful card. It's a 3/3 for 5 with Mobilize and Flight, so you can play this on turn 3 if you have a 1-drop or a 2-drop. There's also Shackling Strands in here, though, and this is 2 cost Sapphire. At the start of each combat phase, target troop gets exhausted. So this is removal, and this is a pretty powerful threat. There's also a Chastise in here, but I don't think that Chastise is worth giving up either of the 2 cards I've already picked up. I think I'm going to go ahead and pick up the Cloudbounder here as opposed to the Shackling Strands. I really like how aggressive and evasive this card is in a lot of different decks, that I'm almost certainly... if I end up in Sapphire, I'm going to play Cloudbounder and Shackling Strands regardless, but I think Cloudbounder is slightly better, especially if we end up in... Wow, okay, and then we immediately get past another Cloudbounder here. There's an Arena Regular in this pack as well. Arena Regular is pretty good if you end up in the Charges Matters type deck, but usually I don't like to move into this Archetype 2 particularly early because if someone else is picking up the Rock Sliders and Arena Regulars, you don't want to be fighting them for them. Cloudbounder, again, is just like an objectively powerful card, so I'm going to go ahead and pick that up. I'm a little bit sad that I didn't take the Shackling Strands now that I got a second Bounder, but, you know, if you bound a couple times a game, you're usually not too sad about it. And then again, we'll kind of try and get a feel for, there was only 1 good Ruby card in that pack, so someone else might be cutting Ruby already. It's something we want to get a feel for. Maybe we don't end up playing this first pick, Pyre Strike, but we definitely want to kind of stay open. We'll see if that Feed the Flames comes back around, if that Arena Regular comes back around. Speaking of cards that are good, Flame Guard here, and this card's actually very good with the Cloudbounders that we've picked up, right? So it's a 2-drop, so that means on turn 3 we can use this to mobilize out our Cloudbounder. It has Diligence, target opposing troop can't block the next turn, so once you start Diligencing this, your opponent has to leave back 2 troops to block it, and like, they leave back 2 troops, you make one not be able to block, and then you kill the other, and then you can crack them with the Flame Guard, and then just like continue applying pressure, in addition to these 2 mobilized troops being good, or these 2 Diligence troops being good with the Cloudbounders that we've picked up already. Wow, and there's a Feed the Flames in this pack, and there have been 5 cards taken out of it already, so that kind of gives me hope that that other Feed the Flames is going to come back around to us as a quality threat. Other cards in here that jump out at me, in the wild aggressive decks, Enlarge and Feral Root Tactics are both pretty reasonable, so someone else is probably going to be able to move into that archetype in this draft. There's a Spirit-Bound Vicar here, which is a good payoff along with the Diamond Blood, I think it's Weaving Banshee that we passed earlier, but again, this is another uncommon, so that archetype has a lot of uncommons that are hard to pick up. Grabbing Feed the Flames is another piece of quality removal. This is one of the better pieces of Ruby removal. This is the best piece of Ruby removal at common in this pack 6 for sure. So this pack, I'm kind of interested in all 3 of these Ruby cards in here, and the fact that all these Ruby cards made it past most of the draft so far makes me confident that other Feed the Flames is going to come back around, hopefully. I think I'm going to prioritize picking up the Stalagamage here, just because it's really good with these Cloudbounders. This card's also just good at pushing aggressive damage. Anytime you have turn 1 Stalagamage on the play in this format, a lot of people don't have 1-drops in their deck, so this ends up pushing 3 to 6 damage, and then generally you're able to mobilize another 2 to 4 points of damage out of it in the mid to late game, and it just like ends up doing a lot of work for a 1-drop in your aggressive deck. This pack doesn't have a ton of good stuff in it. Hopefully people weren't picking Ruby cards out of it. The way that last pack went, I'm assuming there isn't a lot of open Ruby. That being said, there is a Boisterous Ballad here, and this card's very reasonable. We don't always have a ton of stuff to do on turn 1, so you can turn 1 Boisterous Ballad into turn 2 play the Conscripted Ardent Troop. This can also be a bomb sometimes. It can conscript things like William Rowan, or there's a couple other game-ending Ardent 2-drops. to Zozo is very good, for instance, so definitely happy to pick that up. It looks like we're leaning towards a Marzul deck at this point, but if we don't end up picking up Arena Regulars or Rock Sliders, we'll probably play a different champion. We'll kind of get a feel for which champion we're going to be moving into towards the end of pack 2. There's an Ashwood Minstrel here, and this is our first pack, so the Feed the Flames did not come back around, so we might be fighting with someone for Ruby moving into the second pack, but we also, you know, we've got a lot of good Ruby cards here, so hopefully they're not too heavy into Ruby, and there's someone just like looked at the pack and was like, well, Feed the Flames is the most playable card, so let's go ahead and snake that up. Oh, I forgot to check. I clicked a little bit too quickly. I think I saw the Butcher still in there, which is kind of interesting. I think the Arena Regular is in the next pack. I'm going to go ahead and pick up the Ruby's Favor here. If our opponent has artifacts that we're interested in destroying, we can bring this in. This is also like a pseudo-playable combat trick. It's reasonable if you get some Rock Sliders, because it gives Swift Strike when that thing attacks, so I'm going to go ahead and pick that up for sure. We've got about 9 playables here, so well on track. Again, like I've said many a times while drafting here, you usually end up with too many playable pieces of action in this format, so generally, you know, you don't have to be too conservative with what you're picking. Like, if we got 9 playables out of this pack, we're only going to need like 22, 23 playables total. So we're well on track to hit that. And we got another Stalagamage that came back around. I should have noted which pack the Arena Regulars, and I can't remember if it was in this one or the last one, but at either rate, pretty happy to grab a second Stalagamage here. We actually have a lot of 1-drops in this deck, so if we get like another Cloudbounder or 2 in the next pack, would be super excited. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we would have seen the Regular again by now, so it looks like someone else picked that up. Probably the same person that snagged the Feed the Flame, so hopefully passing both of those doesn't bite us here. I'm going to go ahead and grab the Eldritch Shriek. This is unaligned, 2-1. It makes other Shrieks and Whispers cost 2 less. So if you draft a bunch of Shrieks, you can play them out for free after the first one on turn 2. And then Whispers, a 4-4 that draws a card if you have a Shriek out, and it'll only cost 3. So pretty powerful if you can get a lot of them. I'll go ahead and grab the Deadeye Invoker here, but like none of these cards are particularly exciting in this pack. And it's possible there just weren't any Rock Sliders in this entire cycle, but it's also possible that like someone picked up the Rock Sliders and the Feed the Flames and that Arena Regular that came around. Feral Root Tactics and Milk Cave Venom, I guess, and Dingle are all like equally mediocrely playable. I guess I'll grab the Dingle, but nothing in there kind of jumps out at me as too exciting. It cuts a potentially Sapphire playable card. That's like up to 10 theoretical playables already here. Furious Blitzer is actually pretty good in this deck, right? Like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 mobilized troops down here already. And, like, if you have Minstrel on 2, you can actually Furious Blitzer on 3, which is pretty powerful. And honestly, you know, the way this deck's shaping up, we might... Depending on how open Ruby is in this next pack, I've also had drafts that, like, end up where you end up going mono Ruby a lot of the time because you just end up getting so many Ruby playables. Like, we got 8 Ruby playables out of this pack. This pack doesn't have anything too terribly exciting in it. There's another Stalagamage here. Gallant Duelist is kind of expensive for its effect, so I don't think I like picking that up particularly. I think I'm going to go ahead and pick up this Well of Conquest here. Not only is it worth a couple of dollars, but like if we get an Ardent Officer in our set 5 pack in pack 3, I generally wouldn't mind splashing that in this deck, so I think that's reasonable to pick up to help enable that splash. Sorry about that. Having a short conversation with my wife off, you know, God bless mute buttons. So yeah, so the Well of Conquest could enable a Diamond Splash for us, in addition to, you know, one of the things when you're trying to go infinite while drafting is you kind of want to prioritize, like, drafting enough cards that you can, like, 2-1 and have turned a profit on the draft, so, like, picking up a Well of Conquest enables us to do that pretty nicely. This pack, what do we have going on in here? So, there's another Boisterous Ballad, which I kind of like just taking the Ballad and, like, just being super aggressive with this deck, right? Just, like, always having something to do on turn 1 and turn 2. None of the Sapphire cards in here are particularly exciting. Sapphire's Favor would, like, maybe be a consideration if we already had a bunch of Rock Sliders, but we don't, so it's not. Gallant Duelist, like I mentioned earlier, is just kind of expensive for its effect, and usually this card wheels late, so yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pick up the Boisterous Ballad and just keep seeing how this pack's going to end up here. We got 2 pieces of removal. It's pretty good pace. There's another Feed the Flames here. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and pick up the Feed the Flames. One of the things you want to do when you're playing the aggressive decks in this format is you want to generally apply pressure on turn 1 and turn 2 ideally, and then like your turns 3 and 4 are like killing their troops that they're playing out to trying to stunt your pressure. Feed the Flames allows you to do that nicely. That's why Lava Shaper in your set 3, in pack 3, your set 5 pack is going to be very powerful in this type of archetype, because in addition to adding more pressure to the table, it also generally takes a blocker out of the way for you. Other cards I'm interested in this pack, I wouldn't hate if the Windborn Ascension came back around. It's not an Ardent Troop, but we also haven't picked up any Rock Sliders, so it doesn't look like we're necessarily leaning towards Marzul just yet. We're just like a Ruby aggressive deck in general. Wouldn't be too sad if Furious Blitzer comes back around. It's just another card that allows us to apply a lot of pressure, and this card doesn't have a very large pick priority. The uncommons in this pack are kind of mediocre. Blood's Favor is okay, and Blood Arcane Soil is very good in the Dreadling archetype, but not much outside of that. Slicer is really good when you can enable Scrounge, but Scrounge 3 is actually pretty costly in this format if you don't have a bunch of like Dread Apprentices. So, this is kind of an interesting pack, right? So, we have this Rift Spasm here, which is kind of a payoff for the Charges Batters deck, but I actually don't really like this card in this archetype. It kind of pulls you in a different direction. Not only do you not get to choose what it does, but it's not a particularly aggressive card. You, like, play this on 3 as a 2/3, and then, like, your turn 4 is, like, generate some charges and, like, hope it draws a card or turns into a 4/5 so that, like, maybe you can start being aggressive on turn 5. I think I'm actually just going to pick up another Boisterous Ballad here because it's another way to just, like, consistently be able to get Cloudbounders and Furious Blitzers out quickly. The Explosive Interlude is, like, okay, but it's a little expensive for what we're doing. Honestly, we have these 5s and 6s up here, but they both have Mobilize, so like our curve on average is actually really low. And we have this Ashwood Minstrel as well, so this is probably a 17 shard deck at this point just because of how low our curve is. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and pick up the True Art Skirmisher. We passed one of these earlier, but the fact that we've got so many cheap cards and we've got 4 cards with Diligence at this point, I think more than makes it mobilize, and this also draws a card. And because our curve is so low on average that, like, playing this out to draw a card on turn like 3 means we'll have 2 resources up and we'll be able to play most of the cards that we're drawing with her. Man, there's a lot of pretty good stuff in this pack for us. By a lot, I mean 2 cards. There's a Skirmisher and a Stalagamage here. I think I'm going to go ahead and pick up the Skirmisher just because of, like, what I mentioned earlier, why this first one is good, the second one's good for similar reasons. Hopefully the Stalagamage wheels back around to us. There's only 12 cards in this pack, though, so that means there's going to be 11 when we pass it, so it's got to make it past 7 people, so this would have to be one of the last 4 cards left in this pack, but, you know, this is also a common, so maybe we're going to get another one of those in the next pack or so. I wouldn't mind another Cerulean Sage either. Well, it's also possible that, like, I'd probably play the Cerulean Sage. This deck's not going to have a ton of Sapphire in it, like we're primarily Ruby here. And honestly, how much Sapphire we end up playing in this deck is largely going to depend on how good the Ruby is in our third pack. Most of the powerful Ruby cards in this format come from set 5, so you could just, like, draft a lot of powerful cards in the third pack, get, like, Warband Ruffians and Lava Shapers and stuff like that. Blazing Hammers. Here's a Gallant Duelist in this pack, which is like, okay. I don't hate having some of these at my top end, I guess. I don't think Rust Bucket Distractor is particularly good in these archetypes. The target troop can't block is very reasonable, but a lot of the times you can't enable the scrounge on this until turns like 4 or 5, and by the time that happens, the board's usually fairly gummed up, so making one thing not block isn't that great, and like playing a 2-1 for 2 on the second turn isn't fantastic. I'm gonna go ahead and pick up the Gallant Duelist here. I think it's better than the Ruby's Favor by a little bit, just because we want to be applying pressure as opposed to having more tricks. Here's another Cerulean Sage, 10 out of 10, gonna be happy to pick that up. It's another reasonable 1-drop that's really good with, we've got 4 or 5 mobilized cards now. And we're up to 18 playables here already. I think our first cut is probably this Gallant Duelist, followed by this Furious Blitzer, just like keeping our curve super low. Like with these Cloudbounders here, our most expensive card is then 3 with the Mobilize. We've got more than enough troops to be able to mobilize these consistently on the third turn. We ended up not getting any Rock Sliders or Arena Regulars in this pack, so that probably means we don't want to be Marzul, so I wonder what champion we actually want to play with this deck. Hey, look, a Stalagamage came back around, so 10 out of 10, gonna go ahead and pick that up. I wonder if we're still just a Marzul deck because we have so many Ardent cards and just, like, being able to, like, push. So Marzul with Stalagamage is actually kind of okay because it, like, turns your champion power into deal 2 damage to your opponent. Sometimes more than that if they don't have reasonable blockers for this. You just, like, target this with Marzul and then crack with it so that way it gets the Diligence on your next turn. I wonder if playing... I've actually never played it, so I don't know what her name is. The 21 health, 6 charges, gain a Valor for each race among your Ardent troops. We've got humans, we've got orcs, we've got coyotals, we've got elves. Like, we've got a pretty good split on Ardent races here. This might actually just be that champion. Turn 6 is a little bit slow for... 6 is a little bit slow for getting her going, but she's got a pretty powerful effect when she does at that point in the game. Nothing in here we're super excited about. I'm going to go ahead and grab the Arcane Soil because it's the most... I'm going to grab the Puffball, actually. That and the Soil are the most powerful cards in these archetypes, and this is easier to play. If the Sapphire Wild card is coming around this late, there's likely not anyone at the table in that archetype, so cutting it probably doesn't do much. Thornweaver's an okay card. It's you gain +2 temporary resources for each different Ardent race among troops you control, and we have a lot of races. The problem is, like, we're probably gonna have most of our hand vomited out here by the 4th turn. I'm gonna go ahead and leave it in the main deck for now, but I would be kind of surprised if we don't get enough playables in our 3rd pack to cut this Thornweaver ultimately. Searchsmith Engineer is like an okay aggressive card. 3/2 for 3. Scrounge 1, it gets speed. Diligence, gain a charge. Actually, kind of like that a little bit more than the Thornweaver. Just no one's in wild. It's like a late Thorncat. Grab another Ruby's Favor, I guess. Let's have plenty of Ruby's Favors to give out to new players when they join up. Cards reasonable and constructed. 2 cards that I will never probably ever register in a draft, so I'll just, you know, grab one of them, move on with our day. Get some bombs here. Lava Shapers. Would love running Lava Shapers here. Running Lava Shapers. Let's go. Let's go, Lava Shapers. Wow, this pack is rancid for us. Just like... actually 0 cards I'm going to play in this pack. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Maybe. Like I said, your Ruby often depends on the strength of your set 5-pack, and this is not a good start. I guess I'm going to take this Might and Malice because it's the most powerful card in here. It's a total bomb. Assault, you increase these numbers by 1, deal 1 damage to target opposing troop, or target troop you control gets +1/+1 permanently, so that scales up. Yeah, I think I'm just taking that and, like, hopefully... the other card. This pack's like pretty bad on average in general. I guess like Thorn Pup's good if they picked up the cat, and Voracious Zombie's pretty reasonable card too, but like the uncommons in here aren't particularly powerful in this format, I feel like. Emberleaf Bladespin is okay, but it's definitely too slow for the deck that we have going right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and pick up the Might and Malice just because, like, on a scale of power level of limited bombs, this is definitely towards the top, but is what it is. Let's see some Blazing Hammers and some Lava Shapers here. Come on, pack 3, don't let me down. Bring me down. Ooh, I don't think I've ever drafted a deck that has this low of a curve before. I'm kind of excited. There's the Ardent Officer that I said we might be willing to splash off this Well of Conquest. So, I don't know if I guaranteed want to splash that or not. I think I'm going to go ahead and pick up this Ashwood Transmuter because I really like this card. It's a 3/2 for 3. That says discard a card, create a random Ruby common, and put it in your hand. So this lets you, like, turn a resource into a piece of action later game. Like, random Ruby common, often better than having an extra resource on turn 12. I'm going to go ahead and pick Ashwood Transmuter up, but if this Ardent Officer wheels, we're most likely going to grab it and then play it off this Well of Conquest. I'm going to hide this Surgesmith Engineer for now. Come on, where are my Lava Shapers at? Hook me up. Come on, don't let me down, pack 3. Don't let me down. Okay, here's a Blazing Hammer. 10 out of 10, happy to pick that up. 4 damage too. The most important thing about this card is it's champion or troop. So, like, in addition to being removal, this card is just like, alright, dome you at the end of the game. You get into board spots where you're like, man, I really have to kill them this turn. You're like, oh, I have this Blazing Hammer that I can draw to and just, like, crack you with it. There's a Baby Yeti here. We've only seen half the packs in this set, so if we see a Mama Yeti come around, we might pick that up, assuming that this Baby Yeti could wheel. Want to try and keep our curve a little bit lower on average, so these True Heart Skirmishers can do good work for us. Because if you can't play the card that you draw with her right away, you have to discard it. I only have 4 Sapphire cards so far, but I feel like all the Sapphire cards we have are very reasonable. Like, having some evasive threats to push damage in the air after the board stalls from our initial onslaught, it seems pretty good. Like, Caliban or Cerulean could very easily just, like, close out games that we otherwise wouldn't be able to. Man, still 0 for 0 on the powerful Ruby cards. I wonder if someone else is in it and we're just getting cut here, but I feel like there's no way we're getting cut with the cards that we have. Zenthal Zealot is pretty good, but it's kind of difficult to play in a lot of decks. I think I'm going to pick up Veiled Lurker. I actually like this card a lot in this format. It's a 2/2 for 4 that's unblockable. If you have triple Sapphire Threshold, it gets +1/+1. I don't think we're going to play it, but it's a very reasonable card on average, and it's good at breaking through board stalls. If we come up against someone that has a lot of controlling elements and comes up the ground a lot in their deck, we might board this in, trimming like some things like Stalagamage that are just going to get blocked easily. Alright, Iotachi Brute is a very reasonable card here. It's a 4/3 for 4 that whenever a troop you control attacks, this gets -1 cost if it's in your hand, so it gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So we've got more than enough 1-drops that we can make this Brute, you know, cost 3 on turn 3, so it's basically another 3-drop for us. Again, it kind of looks like our curve goes up a little bit here, but the Brute and the Cloudbounders are essentially 3-drops in this deck, so we don't actually curve that high. Ruthless Intimidator is a great pickup here. 3/1 for 2, double Ruby Threshold. Call the Ardent gives you a Valor, and Crush the Underworld makes target troop not be able to block this turn. I actually really like Wrong Turn in this deck too. Put 2 target opposing troops in their hand, and they get, at the end of turn, if this is in your hand, discard it. So like when you play this on turn 4, generally it's like a removal spell for their second worst troop in play, and it tempos the best troop. But I think Intimidator's the better pickup here. Wrong Turn will hopefully wheel for us. Again, want to just prioritize having 1s and 2s so we can like always play this Cloudbounder on 3. Same for the Iotachi Brute. So we ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of removal on our deck. That's pretty reasonable. Man, we're almost at the end of this pack, so I don't think we're going to end up getting blessed with any Lava Shapers. So that is what it is. We only got 1 Shriek, right? Yeah, so the Whisper's not particularly good. I think I'll take the Sapper's Wallbuster just in case we find a matchup where we feel like we want a little bit more removal, but I don't think we're going to play any of their cards in this pack, so I think that's definitely the best one to go ahead and pick up here. We kind of like one more playable in this deck to play 17 resources. The Surging Gearsmith or the Gallant Duelist could be okay, but I'd kind of like it to be another 1 or a 2, I think. Another powerful 2-drop would be great. I think we have 2 more packs we haven't seen yet. Nothing exciting or worth playing in here. I guess I'll grab the Dusk Scout because we have a lot of Ardent troops, so we wouldn't be able to block it most of the time. We get that Underworld Officer come back, or the Ardent Officer that comes back around, probably snake that up. If the Ardent Officer doesn't come back around, that explains why we've been fighting with people for things, and probably why we didn't get any Lava Shapers. I mean, someone else is in Ruby Diamond and picking up cards that we were interested in. There's the Decree. I'm going to go ahead and draft this Decree because this is our first pack. There's nothing else particularly exciting in here because the next pack still has the Officer in it. Between the Decree and the Well of Conquest, we can definitely play the Officer in this deck. Like, we probably cut this Furious Blitzer at the top end, and then, like, play this and then, like, 1 Diamond Threshold to make the Officer work. Uh-oh. Yep, and there's the Officer. She came back around. Sweet. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to make those changes I just said. I'm going to cut this Blazer here, or Blitzer, and I'm going to add this Ardent Decree, and we're going to play this Well of Conquest. It's kind of neat how you're like, we'll grab this in case we get an Officer, and then it all comes together. I don't think this splash is completely unreasonable. This card's really powerful. It says when this attacks, your Ardent troops get +2/+1 this turn, which is just, like, super strong. And like all of these, we've got 8 Ardent 1-drops and just like 3 Ardent 2-drops, and actually everything in our deck is Ardent at this point. So yeah, pretty happy to pick that up. Nothing in this pack is particularly exciting. I'm going to draft the O3 because it blocks our idiots. So what are the resources going to look like for this deck? So we probably want 10 10 rubies probably good. So we have 2 here, so that we have 8 ruby. If we had 8 ruby in this deck, that leaves us at 32. And then one diamond puts us to 33. And then 7 sapphire. 7 sapphire might even be a touch high. They probably only want like 6 sapphire for this deck. I could play a game pretty reasonably without any sapphire thresholds. Maybe I play 11 ruby just because, like, we need double ruby for skirmisher and this intimidator and this hammer. We want to just get it consistently. There's the wrong turn that came back around. Huh. Do I want to make a cut for this wrong turn? That's probably pretty reasonable, right? I'm actually not sure. I'm not sure what I want to trim here. Do I have room for that? I almost certainly can't go down another resource. It'd probably have to be like the Iotachi route, right? It feels like it would have to be the trim here. Is that worse than... Is that worse than trimming? Maybe the Ashwood Minstrel's not good enough. Just like gain a resource is not particularly exciting. Yeah, I think I could buy that for $1. Just like cut this Minstrel. Like we already have plenty of... We don't have a ton of top end. Like these are 3 drops, and the wrong turn and the Blazing Hammer are basically our only hard 4s in this deck. So yeah, I'm gonna cut the Ashwood Minstrel here and see how that feels. So I'm gonna go ahead. What does it look like if we had 9 and then 1 and then 6 here? That doesn't seem completely unreasonable. So before I hit submit here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull ahead and pull up hypergeometric distribution. Let me see if I can put this on screen here real quick. I should probably have this anyways. Window capture. Browser, that is my YouTube. Let's put this on the right one. All right, so put that one lower. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is this is a probability distribution that tells me how likely I am to have certain things. So there's 40 cards in my deck, and there's, if we put 6 sapphire shards in our deck, that's a success. And we want to say, what are the odds we have sapphire by the 3rd turn of the game? So there, we'll see 9 cards by turn 3 on the play, and I want 1 sapphire in there. So with 6 sapphire, I'm 80% to have sapphire by turn 3. So that's probably reasonable. If I kick this up to 7 sapphire thresholds, what are the odds go up by? The 7th one gives us a lot of percentage points right there. So you can see here, this says, let me zoom in. So with 7 sapphire thresholds, we have an 85.8% to have it by turn 3 when we want to play that Cloudbounder. Whereas with 6, we have an 80.8%. So we gain 5 percentage points by adding that second one in here. And the difference being is 10 versus 11 ruby. So with 11 ruby by turn 3 on the play, we want double ruby. So with 11, we're 80% to have double ruby by turn 3. But with 10, I think I'd rather have the higher chance to have double ruby on 3 as opposed to having sapphire on 3. It's a similar percentage drop here. It's 73 versus 79, and actually it's a little bit more, right? Like we get almost 6% to have our double ruby on 3 as opposed to getting a 5% to have a single sapphire. Also, like our deck here probably needs double ruby more consistently than it needs single sapphire a lot of the time. So I think I'm okay with that. I guess the other question is like, how consistent is this Ardent Officer splash? Like how often are we gonna have with 3? Like half the time we're gonna have our diamond by 3, which seems fine, right? Like we're not gonna have the Ardent Officer in every opener, so like not having it early isn't the end of the world. The last question then remains, what champion do we want to play? I guess we want to leave the shardless ones in here. Octavia is the one I was thinking of. So she says, create a Valor for each create a Valor for each Ardent Racewalk troops you control put into your hand. The problem is this doesn't happen until 6 charges, which is a little bit slow. That being said, I feel like High Cleric Marzul's a little bit awkward, but he also has a really high starting life total. He starts with 25 life, which is pretty reasonable. So I could see either of these two being correct. I don't know if splashing Marshal Josephina is worth it. This can't block, this can't attack. We only have 3 diamond thresholds, but this could actually end up being the champion that we want, right? Like, it allows us to push damage through in the mid to late game. Like, this plus like wrong term and a well-timed piece of removal could really let us push through extra damage, especially with the Stalag Mage. Huh. So I think we end up splashing for the Ardent Officer. I'm going to try Marshal Josephina in this deck. I wouldn't be super surprised if I end up playing a different champion than Marshal Josephina after a match or two, but she feels like a reasonable one to start with here. As always, my name is Jeff Hogan. Thank you for watching today's Draft Today video. Remember, if you enjoyed the video, to like it on YouTube and share it on your social media. You can also support my stream in support my content a couple other ways. First is by checking out my sponsors, hexprimal.com. Would love to sell you some Hex TCG singles, and if you buy some cards from them with the code Jeff5, you'll get 5% off of your order in addition to supporting my content here. You can also support myself directly by subscribing on Twitch for $4.99 a month or becoming a patron on Patreon for varying amounts. There's details on how to do those below this video, and that also details the different rewards you get for doing those various things. Also, starting today, I'm going to be recording all of my actual gameplay that I do with these decks. They're not all going to have commentary. I'm going to do commentary for one of them every week. And actually, I think this week's is going to be this deck, because it's kind of sweet, right? So stay tuned for some sweet gameplay videos with this draft deck. And let me know your feedback in the comments, as always, on ways we can improve these videos and different things you liked and disliked and stuff like that. I'll be back tomorrow with another Draft a Day.